Good evening. Welcome to the event Human Rights Equals Women Rights, an event organized by the European Liberal Forum, supported by Institute Novum and co-founded by the European Parliament. Good evening. I'm Daniel Mikets from the Republican Institute, and I'm going to be the host of this online discussion tonight. The main aim of the discussion is to examine the state of women's rights and equality between women and men. We also wish to reflect on the state of women's rights due to the COVID-19 measures in East Central Europe and how it connects to the governmental interventions in the context of illiberal and populist political regimes, and also to shed some light on most recent events like the issue of the new abortion law in Poland. Before we would start with the online discussion with the panel, I'd like to ask Marco Mariani, board member of the European Liberal Forum and also at the Fondazione Luigi Einaudi, to give some opening remarks. Please, Marco.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar realized with the support of Institute Novum and Republican. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Marco Mariani. I'm a member of the board of the European Liberal Forum. For those who do not know us yet, the European Liberal Forum is the political foundation and the think tank of the ALDE party, the Alliance of Democrats and Liberals for Europe. We are working across Europe together with 47 member organizations like Institute Novum and the Republican to test new ideas for a liberal future in a united Europe. Today we are going to talk about gender equality and set the basis for liberal discussions on this important topic. Gender equality is not a women's issue. It is good for men too. And today we are plenty of men who are proud feminists, but there is still a long way to do. And we are only get there by drawing more men into the conversation. And despite many attempts to paint gender equality as a zero-sum game, there are plenty of win-win propositions for these men to advocate. So we have a very excellent panel today to discuss this important topic. I pass the floor back to the moderator, and thank you again for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marco. Now I'd like to give the floor to Sebastjan Pikl from Institute Novum, who is the managing director.
Hello, my name is, hello from my side, from Institute Novum. My name is Sebastjan Pikl, and thank you for joining, everybody. I'm very proud to announce this is the fourth online event of the project we last year carefully prepared with European Liberal Forum and quite several political foundations across EU, and it's the fourth one, as I said, and just before mentioning what we are going to do, I would just like to go over the three previous ones just to mention them. And the first one, which we tackled 2 months ago, the topic was human rights and senior citizens. The second one was human rights and the rule of law. The third one, last week, we had with our Czech partners from the Czech Republic, and it was titled The Right to be Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. all these are important topics, but to my belief, this one which we are going to discuss today, it's probably the most important, because the humanity itself actually lies behind it, or on the top of it. As I already mentioned, this is a event in the context of a let's say fairly long project titled Human Rights in 21st Century, and it's going to last, or it's going to go on for several years. Online events are one part of the whole context. We are going to go deeper into all these topics. We are opening on the online events with podcasts, with articles, and we hope that we'll be able to somehow find argumentation, some insight and some background for liberal politics on European level to use and to be able to fruitfully use it in their let's say argumentation towards the other political families. As you know, human rights are a cornerstone of European integration and one of its fundamental values. We believe that they are being challenged by complex issues deriving out of technological progress, out of geostrategic interest, and most of all, out of a climate change. And to add a recent issue to the human rights now, which is booming last year, it's definitely the COVID-19 or coronavirus disease. This is to some extent, I believe, a game changer, and I hope that we can somehow, with our discussions, add something, that to the overall understanding and promotion and liberty in future after this is going to finish. Just to mention, and then I'll finish my opening remarks. As I said, as you heard, this event, human rights and women's rights, has an equal sign between it and at the end question mark. Actually, this equality should never be questioned, but apparently it is. The question of equal pay, equal treatment for the same work when compared, women and men, when you compare women and men, equal treatment by institutions, right to have full autonomy over one's body. These are only some few questions or issues which arise, and not less important now, as I mentioned, COVID crisis or COVID disease is hate speech and rising domestic violence connected to also to the growing type of illiberal regimes, conservative regimes around Europe. So I'm very tentative, and I will listen this debate carefully because I want to hear how the voices from around Europe. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to Republican Institute, definitely to Zsolt Nagy and our moderator Daniel, and most of all, dear panelists, thank you for accepting our invitation, and I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Sebastjan, for the opening remarks. So now we can start the online discussion. I'd just like to introduce our guest. We have here Katalin Cseh, a member of the European Parliament, and she is at the Renew Europe political group. Zinaida Zlatanova from Lipa, she's a former Minister of Justice of Bulgaria and former head of representation of the European Commission in Bulgaria. Nina Gabish, she's a councillor of the city of Krakow and chairman of the Equal Treatment Council. Rika Shafran is the president of the Hungarian Women's Lobby. And last but not least, Andrea Skrebec from the Institute Novum. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation of Novum, and thank you very much that you're here with us in this online discussion. I'd like to ask first, in the first round, your opinion about the state of women's rights in your country, and if you can just name any fields where inequality between men and women is still an issue. And also if you think that the recent COVID-19 lockdown measures affected in any way the women's rights in your home country. I think we can start with Katalin, please.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And I'm wholeheartedly grateful for the European Liberal Forum, for Republican, and for the Novum Institute to organize this very timely and extremely important discussion. Let me just start by answering your question by stating some facts that have been widely circulated in social media from my country, Hungary, just to set the tone. Unfortunately, we live in a country here in the middle of Europe where it is still acceptable to say it out loud in parliament that domestic violence would decrease if women would spend more time in the kitchen. We have a government who makes a very proud political point about not joining the Istanbul Convention, and it's being defended by the most outrageous and misogynistic argument you could ever imagine. Violence, verbal violence against female politicians are very widespread. It's completely normalized to call a female politician a human virus, for instance. But also, this is just the broadest picture. And let me just maybe go a bit deeper down in my answers to evaluate the layers of what kind of this misogynistic governance means in the daily lives of people. Because I believe that the biggest problem right now in Hungary is that the legal framework does not give women adequate protection, be it protection against domestic violence, be it an adequate family support system, or be it a well-functioning labor law that could work against discrimination in the workplaces. The COVID crisis really exacerbated the problems we already had. The Hungarian government unfortunately failed to apply the necessary measures that was requested from them by a number of international organizations aiming to strengthen the labor code. And as a result, during the pandemic, the hardest hit were low-educated women or women in a vulnerable situation, such as pregnant women. These women are very often not aware of the legal protection they might have, and employers very easily play around the loopholes of the labor code. Very often, women are being dismissed just because they fell pregnant, which is technically against our labor law, but in reality, it's very, very easy to make up just some very bland excuse of like why this employer wasn't performing correctly. I had a lot of personal stories also from my employment history when I went to a job interview and I was asked whether if I plan to get married soon or how is my family planning looks like. Of course, this is illegal, but a lot of people have no idea how they could access legal protection if they are in a discriminated situation. Violence against women is still a huge problem in the country, and this was further strengthened by, further exacerbated by the lockdown measures. Hotlines have never before seen traffic, and however, these measures were never picked up by those who could actually do something about it. But let me just pick on one aspect of this gender inequality, which I think could be accessed in the short term, and upon which I'm working on in the European Parliament, is the inequality in the investment of funds. If you look at the chart that shows that how big of a percentage of the European Social Fund was invested in areas supporting gender equality, Hungary is at the very, very bottom of the European ranking. And now I'm working on a report in the Regional Development Committee of the European Parliament, where we aim to draw binding commitments for member states to use funds to support gender equality. Because let's face it, if we do not invest wisely, if we do not put our money where it's needed the most, then these unequal structures will be just further strengthened for the future to come. We will still live in situations when a girl just has worse chances starting off compared to a boy, and the European Social Fund and the European cohesion policy should be working exactly in the opposite direction. So my mission as a European legislator is to try to fill the gaps that national governments leave. Try to make a binding framework for the European fund to work for every single European citizen and to help the equality of women and men. And one last closing remark, I find it completely outrageous that violence against women is still not a top fight that every government takes, that the Istanbul Convention is still not being ratified by every European country. So we called on the European Commission, and Ursula von der Leyen is open to follow the lead on ratifying the Istanbul Convention with the EU as a whole, and also to make violence against women a law, a breach of law also in the European justice framework. So I believe that in my position, everybody has to do whatever they can wherever they are, in an NGO, in a national parliament, in a local council. And me, in the European Parliament, I'm trying to work for a stronger Europe that works for every woman, including Hungarian women, who are unfortunately being forgotten very often and just being drawn as a simple one-dimensional figure who only serves the need of the Hungarian family policies and see no other ways how to respect or support or help women. This is a huge inequality, a historic mistake, and we all have to join together to correct it.
Thank you very much for Katalin. So this is basically what you've been talking about, is the instrumentalization of women by the Hungarian government. I think it's very interesting how what kind of narratives actually the government is using to legitimize this kind of process. I'm turning to Zinaida Zlatanova. I'm curious, how would you evaluate women's rights in Bulgaria?
Hello, everybody. I'm really very happy to participate in this panel. I'm very honored to be here with all these colleagues and really to discuss such an important matter. Well, I'll begin with the Gender Equality Index 2020, which just recently was out in the public. And it says that Bulgaria stands 9 places below EU average in gender equality issues. And also, unfortunately, almost all the countries that rank even below Bulgaria are from Central Eastern Europe, or so-called two member states. So this is very, very, this is saying a lot about the governance in our countries, about what is going on in the area of women equalities. I'll take the word that Katalin said in her last sentence, forgot it. Women equality, gender equality, and especially the women's rights are very oftenly, I think, in our countries forgotten. They are just pushed aside. They are very frequently considered an issue that has been solved a long time ago. Historically, in communist times, the propaganda taught us that this is the most equal society in the world, and women have gained their rights, and they have already all of them go to work, they're equal to men, etc. So especially the older generations, they have this feeling that this is a solved issue. They have the feeling that this is a battle that has been won from the previous generations, and this is why the sensitivity is not very, very, very high in our, especially in Bulgaria. I think so, and also in the region of Southeast Europe. We have to add to that we have maybe higher sensitivities to minorities' rights, like religious minorities, ethnic minorities, again due to historical, geographical, and other reasons. And woman equality, woman and man equality is somehow pushed aside. So that's why maybe these results of the gender equality index that we have this year. But also Bulgaria is deteriorating in its ranking from 16th place in 2017 to 19th place in 2020. So things are not improving apparently. It's something very interesting also I have to mention. Although women are relatively well represented in power or government positions in Bulgaria, parliament, government, mayors, etc., all the high positions that might be occupied, this doesn't improve our gender equality index. Bulgarian women are at the most risk of poverty among all in Europe. Bulgarian women are at the risk of the same risk, if not worse, of domestic violence. Bulgaria didn't ratify and does not intend to ratify Istanbul Convention, just like Hungary. So regardless of the relatively high representation of women on political and governance positions, it doesn't improve much the status of equality. And this is a very important observation, I think, because sometimes some analysts, observers, or even politicians tend to believe that if women are well enough represented in power positions, then we have a very good solution for all the problems. This is not very much so, especially in our case. Yes, on your last question, of course, that COVID-19 crisis deteriorated the situation. Yes, of course, domestic violence is on the rise in Bulgaria too, like everywhere in Europe, it seems so. Yes, we have all the laws. On the first side, all the laws that can protect us from domestic violence, from inequality. We have introduced all the directives of the EU, but nevertheless, as in so many other cases, the implementation is absolutely not sufficient. So this is for now for my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zinaida, for your evaluation of the women's rights in Bulgaria. It's very interesting that you also mentioned these, well, so-called equal employment rights for women, which was actually a very basic and important feature of communist regimes. I'm turning to Nina Gabris. I'm just curious if you are wearing black and if it's a political statement. I'm not sure, but I think we are all very curious about the latest developments in Poland. Please, Nina.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation for today's panel. Well, I'm wearing black as well by accident, but it's a color of our days recently. As you well know, we are in a strange place in Poland right now. I would call it that we are in the middle of a revolution, because we have a very anti-women government in a country that is already very patriarchal, influenced by Catholic Church. So we don't have an easy starting point, and Law and Justice Party is doing everything to strip women from their rights. And but as much as they try to attack us, we are fighting as much back. And we for now, the protests, the Polish women's strike is still happening almost every day in every bigger cities. First few weeks after the Constitutional Tribunal decisions to basically ban abortion in Poland, we already had a very radical law. Now we basically do not have access to legal abortion, and it was decided by a tribunal, by the Constitutional Tribunal, which is highly influenced by Law and Justice Party. It's not an independent tribunal, so this decision is treated for now by women's strike movement as sort of independent and personal testimony of Julia Przyłębska, which is president of Constitutional Tribunal. This decision has not been yet published by the government, which is basically their their obligation. But they did not do it, and they did not do it because the opposition all around in our country is so large and so strong. They are not. I think they are afraid, and this is the success of the women's strike movement, because they didn't think that the protest is gonna be so strong, especially during COVID, because they tried that. Early in April, they first presented the radicalization of abortion then, but they decided not to pursue it. And now in autumn, they thought this is gonna go. There are gonna be some protests, but not large ones. Well, they were surprised by the scale of it, by the anger, and I think this is the moment women in Poland also stopped trying to search for some kind of gentle compromise, gentle message. We've decided it's war. We've decided that this decision is so dangerous for women's lives in Poland that there is no time to say it in a gentle word. So as you may know, the main main text you can see on the banners or in the billboards and so on. It's pardon my French, but this is what it is right now. It's fuck off. This is what we are saying to the government as a Polish strike and as Polish women's strike, because there's been too much, and there is no place for any conversation or even a dialogue. We are fighting back, and for a few weeks the police treated those strikes well, without major pushbacks. But recently, last I think 2-3 weeks has been very very dangerous. The police have been sort of, I think, influenced by the government to act in a very brutal way. They've attacked MPs, they've attacked people on the streets with gas. Physically, they've attacked them. There has been a lot of arrests. Because they are still, because of the COVID restriction, they are still saying that all of those protests are illegal, because we can only protest in a group of 5 maximum. And as you saw probably in the media, there have been millions on the streets. So now we are sort of in this kind of impasse, because the government has no idea what to do. They've been radicalizing the police against the protesters. And for now, the Polish women's strike is also organizing in smaller cities to spread the message outside of Warsaw, Krakow, Wrocław, to the smaller towns, which is important. And well, I think there has been change. There has been breakthrough. If in this context, I think this is a beginning of an end of this government, and I think the women are gonna be the reason they are gonna collapse. To be honest, I think in every crisis we've had in last years, and we've had a lot of crises, this is the one that is gonna change things. Because they've lost the narrative, they've lost the power to sort of construct this public opinion, to influence public opinion. They've lost their game, to be blunt, and they don't know what to do, and we know what to do, and we are mobilized. So I think this revolution is gonna is not gonna just end. It's gonna change and things in Poland, but obviously it's gonna take a lot of time. From my personal experience, what is important is to work also locally, on a local level, on the local governmental level, because for now we don't have the power to influence the decisions on the government on the central level, but we have the power to change things on local levels, because we have our mayors, we have city councils on our side, and so on. So what we can do, we can actually send a strong message that is gonna go farther and farther. And for example, recently in Krakow, we've accepted and we've joined a European chapter for equal treatment on local level between men and women, and we've been the third city in Poland that has done so. in the same time, I think every major city in Europe has already been a member for years. So I think that that radicalization and the situation in Poland is also sort of pushing the centrists to the point that they are not able to say maybe someday. I think they've understood that this is the moment we have to do these things, because it's not gonna be it cannot wait. So yeah, I hope I've cleared some things, but I think I'm gonna go on afterwards a bit more.
Thank you very much, Nina. I plan to discuss this. Katalin mentioned the internalization, and actually the Polish context is also can be understood if we observe or analyze the nature of illiberalism. I hope we are going to have enough time to discuss that as well. Rika Shafran, I'd like to ask your opinion about the state of women's rights and how the COVID-19 measures affected it in Hungary, please.
Thank you very much also for your invitation, and I'm very honored to be on this panel. I have to say first that Nina's description of what is happening in Poland it really draws admiration from us, and we stand in solidarity with you. It's not just inspiring, but I think it's a process that shows politicians all around Europe how important this issue is, women's bodily autonomy and all connected to that, and how big a power women can have on these political issues. So also what I think has been typical in this COVID situation in Hungary is that the government has made decisions affecting certain human rights, like women's human rights as well, without societal consensus. And one of them was, as Ms. Chair has mentioned before, this political declaration that the parliament passed in May on the rejection of the Istanbul Convention in the midst of the very during the quarantine, when it was the heaviest, when everybody was at home, and the reasoning they used was to actually step up the measures to defend women against violence, but in fact the approach the Hungarian government takes is often totally gender blind, and actually does not recognize the fact that it's mostly women. 90% or more of the victims are women. And the other issue that they made a decision on without any consensus was that in late October, the Prime Minister signed and actually co-sponsored an anti-abortion declaration dubbed the Geneva Consensus Declaration. And apart from Poland, it was mostly non-European countries of very authoritarian states that signed this declaration under the motto of promoting women's health. We can see another trend that the Equal Treatment Authority was dispersed in Hungary, and since the accession to the EU in 2004, this institution has been very, very important for raising cases against employers, for example, when they were discriminating against women. This institution has been incorporated into the Ombudsman's office, but so far they have, for example, in the case when people's right, single parents or single people's right for adoption was curtailed by a new law, the Ombudsman's office didn't even raise a voice. So it is already not proven a very good decision, or a very a decision that would be positive in our opinion. And finally, it is well known, I think, about Hungary that the women's rights and gender equality is not really recognized. It's really subsumed to family policies. But the family support system is very selective. So more and more support is given to upper middle class families with a lot of children. And this causes growing inequality between social strata, and it leaves whole big groups of people behind. I think what the COVID crisis has shown, which was a situation that we followed not only as a Hungarian women's lobby, but also as a member of the European women's lobby all throughout Europe, what it has caused is that it has shown the indispensable role of women in care, not only care that they provided not only to their families, but and in the household, but also to others in situations of isolation or economic insecurity. And this role of women should be recognized and incorporated into economic and social policies more in the future. Of course, unfortunately, COVID has also exacerbated the problem of male violence at home, but I would like to come back to this later on.
Thank you very much for Rika Shafran. Andrea Skabec, I'm turning to you. How would you sum up or evaluate the state of human rights in Slovenia, please?
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to say greetings from Slovenia to all my colleagues, and I'm very glad to be a part of this very important panel about women's rights. Well, in Slovenia, we have these legislations and also the constitution very good written. That means that we are very equal to men, and that in our legislation there is no differences between the genders. But the implementation of these legislations in the companies, that is something different. I would say that I can agree on most things that my colleagues already spoken out today, especially Kathleen mentioned that when you go to an interview for a job, they usually ask when do we plan a family, how many children do we plan, etc. And this is really something that should not happen on such interviews. Usually men is not asked about that, and it's also not important for them. But still, well, I don't know exactly on which place on the scale about this equal gender we are, but I don't feel that in Slovenia would be a big differences between men and women generally, but in some special parts is definitely differences, and probably this COVID situation brought out everything that we didn't think about that before. A lot of women still say that in spite that we are more educated, we have a lot of good skills, may be different from men, but still, women have lower salaries than men. And this is something that we need to fight on, because I really don't think that men can earn more if we do the same job and we are equally educated for the same job. Also, what we have noticed recently, that because of this COVID crisis, more women lost their jobs. Like women can be disposed, like something like that. And suddenly we got a lot of new jobs at home. For the time being, we are not just wives and mothers. We are also teachers, playing partners. Sometimes we need to be psychologists, nurses. We need to take care of older people at home because everything is locked down at the moment in Slovenia. So a lot of new jobs stand up, and nobody asks us if we are capable of doing everything, and how do we feel now? Because women usually, we are just doing and doing and doing, and until we drop down, of course. But this COVID situation is really something that opened up, maybe also in Slovenia, that we haven't much discussed about this inequality. Now we noticed that it's still the genders are not equal at all. Also, in this COVID situation, we've got this new government in the beginning of March. It's a right-wing government, and we can notice that the culture of the communication has dropped rapidly, really. There is a lot of sexism, racism, and this is something that we are really not, we have to fight against that. This is not something that we can accept in the 21st century, not now. This is something in the past, and we really need to go to be this. Well, this is really something that it cannot be just overlooked. What is so in this COVID situation, what we have noticed is also that more violence is at home. This is also some this institution who has dealing with such matters brought up. So more violence, more poverty, and the crisis brings up everything that we were not in the past. We were not looking after enough. So we were just satisfied with our lives until this COVID situation has brought up everything what it's not okay.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It's very interesting, actually, what you said. By the way, we made a research at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences about the voluntarism during the COVID-19 pandemic, and according to the data, the volunteering also reflects the traditional division of labor between women and men. So women are doing the voluntary jobs which are connected to the household, while men are going out from the household. So like they are delivering donations, for example. And I think it's interesting how volunteering itself also just reinforces these traditional division of labor. When I was making just a really brief desk research during I prepared for this conference, I could identify two major issues which are, I think, important when it comes to the pandemic and women's rights. Maybe you are going to correct me. One such issue is domestic violence. It is said that because of the lockdown, and some of you also, Andrea, for example, also already mentioned domestic violence. So during the lockdown, women don't have the opportunity to ask for help for outside from the household. So it's a serious situation. And another issue is homeschooling. So in most cases, it is it could be, as a matter of fact, homeschooling could be actually could help for women to become more familiar with information techniques, or to have another bond with the children. But basically, it's another form of unpaid work. So in the second round, I'd like to ask your opinion about these two issues. If these issues are taken seriously in your country, and if you see any kind of measures or solution which has been initiated by decision makers, by political decision makers, or by the civil society. Katalin, we can start with you. I think maybe we are also interested that maybe on the European level are some solutions which like to actually tackle these issues, unpaid work of women during the lockdown, and domestic violence. Please, Katalin.
Thank you. I was listening so carefully to the prior interventions, and I already made some notes, and I might just reflect on what some of you said. But yes, just to answer first the questions, I think that COVID, of course, created a lot of new problems, but in many areas, it only made the problems we had even bigger and stronger. This is visible in, the sectors that are most affected, the healthcare system, for instance. In Hungary, the healthcare system has been in ruins for a decade. And when a pandemic hits, of course, it's very visibly getting hit stronger. But also there are those areas which especially was mentioned in the questions that are also neglected areas. And now this neglect that has been piling up for years and years and years and creating these negative distortions in society, within families, are now hitting the already vulnerable people even more stronger as a consequence of the lockdown. So let me start with the unpaid care burden, and then I will finish with the domestic violence. So I think it's not only a COVID problem. So women have been bearing the care burden for, for as long as humanity existed, basically. It was always the women who took care of the sick relatives. It was always the women who took breaks when the child was ill, who were, and it was so very well put by one of you, by Andrea, that you are not only going to work, but you are also a full-time cook, you are a full-time nurse, you are doing all the errands. And if we would quantify how much these kind of activities would cost, if we would hire somebody to do that, we would be very, very surprised to see that how much actually society is saving just through not paying women well enough. as a compensation for all the work they are doing, because it is work. I mean, I don't know if you've tried to take care of a sick relative or in the audience, but it is very, very difficult. And a lot of people have been doing it for, I don't know, months or years even. But yes, during the lockdown, everything piled up. So combined with the effect of teleworking and also the lockdown of schools, for instance, that happened in Hungary, the results were very, very hard on women, I think, adding an extra layer of stress, even more and more need to perform at such an already very, very difficult situation. And this is really a dramatic increase in this burden, and I feel that it wasn't really addressed at all. I mean, it was, of course, addressed in conversation people were having with each other when they were walking the dog, or I don't know, talking on the phone. But I've never, ever heard anybody from the government side even acknowledging that how hard is it to do your job, homeschool two teenagers, and also maybe look after your parents who cannot go to the shops because they are just, you know, too old and too vulnerable. It is a lot of work. So I think for this, we need to globally rethink, I believe, the system of unpaid work and actually offer certain larger remuneration for people who are performing these duties. But you were also asking about the European aspect, and I'm very happy to answer that as well. We are pushing hard in the Regional Development Committee for a so-called care deal for Europe, which basically puts care work at a more global perspective, and to provide care workers and those who perform unpaid care work at home with support, financial support as well, and to give funding for governments, which could be used for these matters. Because really this is one of the grassroots of the ingrained inequality within our societies. The burden of unpaid work is very often what keeps women away from excelling, away from getting a promotion, away from being able to hold down a full-time job and instead cutting back to 4 hours. And of course, if it is a choice, it's fine. But if it is a burden, then the legislation has to fight against it. And coming to your second question, domestic violence. I mean, I don't know how you felt about the lockdown, but I suppose it was very hard for all of us mentally, not being able to leave, the monotony. Well, imagine that a lot of people were locked up with their abusers. They had nowhere to hide, nowhere even to make a phone call if necessary. It was a permanent stress for a lot of people, a permanent scare of their lives. And they also feel that it just gets lost somewhere. And it was so very well put in the prior round that women's issues, I think it was Einaudi who said it, that women's issues are sometimes like getting lost somewhere on the bylines. This is like not so important, maybe. They are not in the spotlight. But the reality is that the hotlines that have been handling the complaints for women saw their traffic increase to double-fold, or even 3 times as much as they had before. And maybe Reka will have more information about it. But from what I heard, those kind of NGOs who provide this very instrumental and very vital support, they received basically no financial help from the government, and they had to work with the same staff and with the same limited budget they had before, with a very much increased traffic. We were, my party Momentum have been putting forward some ideas that maybe still could be considered, for instance, to really help staffing these NGOs to be able to provide 24/7 hotline, because a lot of these telephone lines, unfortunately, are only functioning for, I don't know, certain days or certain periods of times, because of course they just cannot afford to have a full-time staff, and nobody can blame them for that. But it is really, really important to have it fixed. Also, it would be very important to have a widespread text messaging service, because if you are in a 30 square meter flat locked up with somebody who is actually violent towards you, you are probably not able to make a phone call. And I know that one of the NGOs, the Nana NGO, I think they have a chat application, but these just weren't advertised, I think, well enough. And this is also not something that should be the burden of the NGOs, who are trying to do the best job they can with very limited resources, but it should be taken up to the government level. And let me just tell you some good examples. I was talking a lot with my colleagues in the European Parliament about this, and I know that I think in the Netherlands, they had in the state television the hotlines being displayed in prime time. These kind of how to get help if you need to topics were very often raised as the public service announcements in the media. There was also even, it was a very, very good idea that like a very well-watched television show, and one of the women wrote down this like secret code on her hand, showing it to the screen, because it's, I think in this community, but maybe those who with more experience than me could tell me more, but it's very widely known that sometimes codes are used. So for instance, you call a phone number, which is a phone number for support, but you are calling them that like, I don't know, I want to order a pizza or something like that. But a lot of women, of course, they do not know what these codes are, because how would they know that? So it was a very well built up awareness spreading campaign from the side of the government to try to reach those in need with the messages of how they can ask for help. And one last thing that I found brilliant, I think it was in France, that there was a support a hotline installed in pharmacies. Because where you can go, if it is lockdown, you don't really have a lot of excuses to go to places, right? But you can go to the pharmacy. And basically pharmacists were trained with a very simple brief to ask 2 very simple questions. And if they get a certain answer, they just go to the next room to the pharmacy and they call the authorities. And it was brilliant. And it was also very widely advertised. And I would have loved to see some measures like that, some creative measures, some effort from my government. But I have to say that also Europe could have done more on this to help those who are like really in the most vulnerable situations of their lives. So I'm very worried what will happen in the winter, but there are some good practices to learn from, and I can only hope that yes, legislators will learn their lesson eventually.
Thank you very much, Katalin. It's good to hear about such good practices, and well, I totally agree that you mentioned that the lockdown is mentally challenging, but probably this challenge is going to be bigger during the Christmas season, which is the time of the year when a lot of people are mentally challenged already. We hope that until then we can have such good practices in order to avoid domestic violence. Zinaida, I'm asking you about, well, as a matter of fact, Katalin mentioned care work, which is also an issue, and it also actually influences or affects Eastern European women, because also from Hungary, from Romania, from Bulgaria, a lot of women are traveling to Western Europe. So maybe the lockdown is also has, it's not just can increase domestic violence, or it also increases the unpaid work, but also it somehow constrains the economic opportunities of Eastern European women. We are curious, we'd like to hear your opinion about it. Please, Zinaida.
Oh, thank you very much, Daniel. Yes, I agree with everything that all the colleagues said. And on one hand, it's very devastating to hear such problems in Europe in 21st century. But on the other hand, the fact that we have similar issues and problems, and that they are so common, provides for maybe some uniform decisions, some European solutions, some common solutions. The problems being so common and so similar. So this is a good news in the bad situation, maybe. What concerns the lockdown measures and the homeschooling and the unpaid work, the situation is like everywhere, I think, very bad. I cannot see, honestly, any advantage, because you asked us if there is any advantage, at least, for the women from the homeschooling and staying at home in the home office. I cannot see any advantage, honestly. Because, for example, in Bulgaria, the women and the parents who do homeschooling with their children, they are mostly working parents who normally go to work. And normally women are those who stay home, of course. So this is somehow self-evident in our societies still. Those parents who are not able to assist their children in homeschooling, they are lagging behind. They are maybe out of societal networks, and this is reproducing itself. These problems are reproducing themselves with the children, because only these days Bulgarian Minister of Education actually explained school children are outside the system now, because they either don't have the devices to participate in online studying, or their parents are not able to assist them. So you can imagine what repercussion this will have in the years to come, and how easy it is actually to downslide, to backslide in things that we have fighting for years, like staying at school, like have good employment conditions for women, but not only, also for all the employees. And here I have to mention, maybe as a kind of a good news or good practices, that even some employers in Bulgaria are more understanding and more supportive to their employees in the COVID situation than the government and the institutions. Maybe for purely market issues, because they need those employees, and because we all lack human resource in Eastern Europe. But this is the fact. The institutions are absolutely neglecting these issues. I only can tell you that the first and the second lockdown now are being introduced with 2 days notice. So can you imagine how you inform your employer that you have to stay home with your child? And this is a very, very neglective policy from the government, badly organized, and this, of course, only worsens the situation and the burden. What concerns domestic violence, as I said before, situation is bad everywhere, I think, in Europe and in the world, maybe, due to the COVID crisis. But this is the most dramatic manifestation of all the problems you're talking about. So apparently, we need some solutions here too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zinaida. Asking from Nina. Well, the main issue when it comes to women's rights is the reproductive rights, the abortion law, which was basically banned in Poland. But beyond this, do you discuss, or is there a discussion on the growth of domestic violence during the lockdown, and on the unpaid work, which is a bigger burden for women because of homeschooling? Please, Nina.
Yes, yes, of course. The main topic is abortion, but we have a lot of problems. So we have a lot of discussions about, well, everything really. But I think in case of the work and home balance and care burden, I remember from the first lockdown in the spring, there was a very popular image going all around the internet, and there was this card on the door that was, as I assume, stick by a dad, and the card said, "Daddy is working, do not interrupt. For the first question, no. For the second question, no. For the third question, ask mom." And it was supposed to be funny, but obviously that it shows in this one example, where is the problem? Because this attitude towards women's work is very harmful. Because what we can see in this one little picture is that women's work is something less important. It's something that can be actually interrupted. It shows that it's not that important that mother could actually work. And that also sort of illuminates on other sectors of life, because if we think of women's work as something less, our employers think as our work is something less, so they pay us less. And women are also, by that extension, first to be fired, because you always have this cultural stereotype that a man is gonna be responsible for the house. So this women work is something, an added value, but not the basic. So I think that pandemic showed something that we've been struggling for years, and it only showed how big a big problem it is, because obviously, as Kathleen said, mothers became nurses, became teachers, became caretaker, and so on. This role was not divided. That is at work and closed doors. That is something to be respected. And mothers are always good mothers should be always for the kids, and as such, they are not. Their work is not that important, and we have also this cultural construct of that is sort of forced on us. How the society is really strict on how to be women, how to be mothers. What does it mean to be a good mother? We have this socially constructed guilt. Women can often feel guilty because of their work, because they are not as perfect mothers while they work, as stereotype says. So there is a lot of the sexist stereotypes in the air that also multiply the situation. This is not only practical, but this is also on a cultural level. It shows how we see the role of women in society in general. So it's not only the pandemic. We only have it up close during the pandemic, I think. So that's obviously a problem. We have observed that in Poland, actually, If it goes to a wage gap, it's not as bad as you would think, because we only have a 7% wage gap, and that's good in Europe. But if you observe it closely, if you observe the higher offices, it goes. The wage gap goes high and high and high. So only on the basic level of employment, this wage gap is 7%. It's not as good. It's not good at all to have a 7% wage gap, but it's, you know, but it's as far to equality as you go higher in work. But if and to your second question, answering to your second question about domestic violence, there has been a lot of discussion about this. The pandemic, obviously, similar to other countries, showed that the problem is major. We've had since 2017, we've had this statistic that 3 women die as domestic violence victims by every week in Poland. And I think that after the pandemic, that is gonna change for the worst. We had a very active campaign from our ombudsman in the spring, showing how to call for help, where to go, what to do. There was some of independent campaigns also, as previously been said. In Poland, there was a popular site that was officially selling some kind of cosmetics, some eye cream or body lotion, and that was obviously a code for certain certain attacks. You could actually, if you've been attacked, like, your oppressor could not know that you are trying to find help, because from what he could see, you were only buying an eye cream. So that became popular. We've had a lot of lines by NGOs that were established during that time, but also in the same time, in the, I believe it was August, Law and Justice Party decided that this is the best time to actually start a conversation about declining Istanbul Convention that is actually present in our legal system, because we've accepted that before during the civic platform government. They did not do so yet, but this discussion was mainly based on the idea that this Istanbul Convention is not actually something, it's not about combating violence against women, but this is about a gender and a gender ideology, whatever that means. The ideology is something our government likes very much. We have LGBT ideology, we have a gender ideology. That means nothing. That is just this evil abstract enemy they have, and they are fight against. They are using it only populistically, but it works because it changes the discussion from combating violence to some gender Europe influence, dangerous for our. So it's dangerous for our families. It's gonna change things. It's a large conversation, but they've successfully described Istanbul Convention as something that is actually threatening Polish families and Polish kids. And this kind of narrative became mainstream at some point, especially in public and politically dependent media. There has been a lot of pushback from women's strike. There has been a lot of pushback from the opposition about this. So this plan of rejecting the Istanbul Convention was actually stopped for now. Possibly they are gonna go back and try it again. For now, they are scared of women, so I hope they don't have this kind of ideas. But combating violence against women became from very well accepted issue that we have to fight against to a controversial issue that we have to to be treated delicately, because it can be dangerous for the family. So it became absurd. But the government, so as you can imagine, the government who is trying to decline the Istanbul Convention is not really doing anything practical to combat violence against women. What was established in those last few months, there was a lot of local programs that actually started to develop and to work. So because it's something that cities could also have and be engaged in. So we've done that as much as we could and as much we had financing for, but that was and that is a part of the solution, but only a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, for your inputs. I'm asking from Reka. You're working for a women's advocacy organization. Do you have more job to do since the lockdown because of these developments, like the increase of domestic violence or more unpaid work for women?
Well, we are an advocacy group, but also we are an umbrella of several 20-some organizations, and two of them especially pay attention and try to help women victims of violence. It's what they have experienced really rhymes with what my fellow panelists have said about the increase of domestic violence. And so, for example, because NANE's hotline is run by volunteers, and it's quite underfunded. It has a special mission, and it's always called by callers. It has been hard to tell what the capacity could have been, or what need there was for how much more capacity. But they have noticed that the hotline was always on, and what they could notice that the victims were much more stressed. They felt much more trapped. They wanted to get help more quickly because they needed it. They had so much fewer possibilities to leave home and to get to a safer place that none actually, and also the other organization, Patent, installed this chat hotline that Katalin has mentioned, because it has really helped. It was a new medium that they could use. What they experienced was that the financial burden and the effects of COVID were bad enough, but women experiencing financial forms of violence have experienced that they have added up, and they have really been trapped under both the constraining relationship and the grown burden of the housework, and of course the generally traditional gender roles that are typical of such issues or such relationships. And unfortunately, the number of victims has not gone down, although the government has said that certain new ways of helping victims have been installed. What the NGO experts have said was that the governmental hotline mostly saves those women who are in grave danger. So all those women who sense that they are in danger, that the situation might get worse in any moment, often don't get help because the police and the authorities wait for a moment where they get physically attacked when there's even blood flowing. And we find that a really negative message. In terms of the general effects of the lockdown, I cannot add so much more to what you have said before, but I would say that the social scientists who did a very good job of researching this very unique situation, they said that the gender roles, the traditional ones, have really strengthened or have become more exacerbated by this whole situation, and they also said that the strict educational policies have made it worse in Hungary because it's so competitive to get children into the right school, including girls, because, for example, the compulsory education age has been lowered to 16 instead of 18. The families, and especially the women, have to do all they can to provide their kids with the right education. And for example, in Hungary, people had to take their own leave. They had to be on sometimes, so they had to take their yearly leaves for the time of the quarantine in spring, unlike in other countries. And for example, one research project which compared the situation in Romania and in Hungary found that in Hungary, women felt much more insecure because of this. Unfortunately, they had nothing to fall back on if they lost their jobs, for example. Whereas in Romania, they got 70% of their salaries automatically if they had to pay to stay at home if their kids were too young to study on their own, for example. So at the same time, relative to this, men, fathers, their situation didn't change as much. Another thing that I would like to point out finally is that the situation of access to education, especially in COVID times, in the different regions where poverty levels are different, where poverty level is high, it created a very, very difficult situation. And there were initiatives, but not so much by the government, but rather by companies to raise money and donations for these zones or for these areas of Hungary. And they have managed by between March and after Easter, they have managed to give this support to quite a lot of these families, but this was not a governmental program, and it wasn't enough to support everybody, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for Reka Schafran. I'm asking from Andrea if these issues, risks like domestic violence or unpaid work, are these appropriately addressed in Slovenia, according to you?
Well, first I would like to tell you that a few days ago I made a calculation and put together all the jobs that I need to do during this COVID pandemic. And of course, my salary would be really great if those jobs will be paid, even for men. This is just something that we need to discuss about in the future. Well, during this lockdown, I would put out 4 things that in Slovenia are most popped up. For example, domestic violence, and of course, loss of jobs, poverty. We didn't speak a lot about poverty, but this is a big problem during this pandemic. And of course, in Slovenia, also sexism. This is really what's bothering me like a woman. And I would say that today we really made a list of a lot of things that's bothering all the women. Our government doesn't deal with these problems because maybe you have heard, but in Slovenia for the last 3 weeks we have really a high amount of infections, and also the number of deaths are really, really high. So this is the biggest priority for our government. But after, if I can conclude, after this COVID pandemic has ended, we need so today the list has been made, and after that all the government should put these problems on the agenda. And what we need to do, well, women, we need to fight. Like women in the past fight for the rights that we have today, and we need to fight to get more rights and not to lose the rights that we already have.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But Sebastjan has now shown me that we have still time. Thank you. So the last issue I'd like to discuss is a more political issue. Nina already talked about the this anti-gender movement, or gender as kind of a frame which has been used by populist illiberal regimes. So this gender is became something like a new enemy for these right-wing populist regimes in East Central Europe, especially in Hungary and in Poland. These illiberal regimes aim to amplify cultural conflicts. I think it's very obvious in the Polish case. But as a matter of fact, when it comes to the pandemic, to the COVID-19 pandemic, these are real issues. So it's a real health and economic crisis. So what do you think? Can populist regimes still use gender as kind of a main adversary, or can they communicate that that gender is a problem, while in reality, what's the real problem, and for what we would need real policy solutions is the health crisis and the economic crisis. I think we are going to start with Katalin. I think because of the recent developments in the Hungarian politics, I'm not sure if the others have heard about the case of Hungarian conservative MEP. This whole anti-gender agenda is can be less effectively used by the government. But we like to hear your opinion. And please, Katalin.
Well, if the question is if populist regimes can still use gender as an enemy, well, unfortunately, the answer is yes, they are doing it right now. And it sometimes ends up in very extreme places, such as the Hungarian delegation was blocking the conclusion of a very formal and very technical agreement on the EU-Africa cooperation, just because it contained some sub-paragraph which was speaking about gender equality. So yes, it's happening. However, the truth is, these populists are always trying to pitch people against each other. This is their recipe of functioning. They define who is like us and who is them, and they are just like drawing artificial lines in the snow, creating artificial divisions in society, and this entire hateful rhetoric against women or against, well, this so-called gender discussion. It is exactly like that. They're trying to find somebody to blame for the problems instead of really addressing the deepest problems we are facing in economy, in poverty, in corruption, in healthcare, and all that. However, I am very skeptical when people say that this is just a smokescreen, or we shouldn't care about these kind of attacks because it's just like a divergence of attention. Because as a result of the rhetorics, or what Reka mentioned, even in Hungary, it sometimes even appears in legislation, such as in the very unnecessary, or like, I mean, I don't know how to put it, this very absurd ban on transgender gender change in the middle of the pandemic as a protective measure. So when this kind of legislation is made, or when this rhetoric is used, people suffer. Thousands of people, tens of thousands of people suffer. And we are rolling back the progress we've achieved in the last decade. So I think it's a real threat. And not only because this is just some cloud behind which we don't see the real issues. Of course, this is also the part of the problem. But we are just like normalizing attacking people. We are normalizing pitching people against women, against women's rights, against feminists, or like anybody who considers this issue as important. So I mean, I think we have to be outspoken in opposition. I don't agree with those politicians who try to adopt the narrative, or who say that, I mean, I was sometimes advised not to say that I'm a feminist, because it will just anger Fidesz supporters, and it will get me trapped in this narrative cycle I don't want to be at. I mean, I think we should be proud who we are. We should be bold, outspoken, organizing on the streets, in the communities, as Nina was speaking about earlier, and also to provide solutions to the inequality problem, but also, if we are in a position where it is part of our job, such as in politics, to the other problems of society, so that we can show to the world that real societal progress cannot be done without the rights of women being respected. We have to be smarter, but also I think we have to be louder as well. Just be proud who we are, be proud what we are representing. And I mean, I think we are fighting the good fight, and we should never back down from that, because our opposition will just grow stronger here. But I mean, appeasing autocrats, appeasing sexists is never the way to go. So I hope we can continue to inspire women or fighters of equality around us and lead our societies to a more equal world with more respect and better legislation governing it.
Thank you very much, Katalin. Zinaida, what is your opinion? Can be this strategy successful? I mean, scapegoating gender and claiming that the gender movement aims to destroy families. Can it be such a successful political interpretation by populist regimes, like, let's say, in 2015, the migration issue?
Yeah, I forgot to unmute. Sorry. Yes, you know, Daniel, you're right that something has to be done. Why? Because the gender ideology as an enemy is a very convenient policy for the populists, for the nationalists, for the illiberal governments, as you call them. It's a very convenient, so to say, enemy. It's very convenient to distract people's attention, from the corruption, from misuse of EU funds, from all the not functioning systems of health and education, as we discussed before. So somehow maybe we have to make a joint effort to, on our part, as liberal people, to explain back to the people that this is only a distraction for them. This is only to cover under the carpet all the major problems that our societies have. And in this respect, it is also sort of threat to democracy itself, because we are trying to deny something, some non-existent. We are trying to deny some non-existent issue, some non-existent problems, instead of discussing all the time the huge problems we have with bad governance, with corruption, with all kinds of misuses that are happening in many countries, unfortunately in Bulgaria too. In our case specifically, this role is, so to say, given and performed by the junior government partner, but by the junior coalition partner, which is a very nationalistic and the populist bloc, but also the main ruling party is secretly, not that openly like in Hungary and Poland, but also supporting this kind of things. They're very convenient for them too. So I think we have to take out of their convenience these people who so successfully, we have to admit it, use this anti-gender ideology for their purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zinaida. Nina, I think the Polish case is a kind of best practice for illiberal regimes to use the so-called gender ideology as or frame it as an enemy of families. I spoke with the Polish colleagues and friends, and they told me that what now is happening in Poland is really everything is about. It's a real cultural fight, a cultural Kampf. It's about ideologies, norms, values, and it seems like that it's served the interests of the illiberal populist right-wing regime there. But as a matter of fact, the society is changing, so the values are changing. What do you think in the long run? While it seems like now it's successful in Poland, but in the long run, can it be still successful to claim that gender is something which, or women's rights would ruin traditional families?
Sorry. I think what is important to remember is that gender ideology as and an LGBT ideology, also very popular in Poland, is always a cover-up. It's a big buzzword, it's a big distraction from the real issues. We see that every time the government is in crisis, or traditional right-wing organization or parties are, or a church is in crisis, this idea of the dangerous ideology that is gonna attack our Polish families and our Polish kids is somehow presented in widely in internet, in public media. It becomes very popular and very very discussed, widely discussed. And I think the first time we've heard about gender ideology, it was, I believe, 2013 or something like that. And it was the first big pedophilia case in Polish church. And in the same time those headlines appeared, the headlines about dangerous gender ideology appeared also, because this was a counterattack. And this is always used as a counterattack, as a distraction, as a way to manipulate the public opinion, to change the course of the conversation. Because what we can see now, we can see that the government made a lot of bad decisions during the pandemic. The country is in crisis. We have a major problem in health department. We have a major problem on an economic level because of the lockdown. We have a lot of protests from different members of the society. We've had protests from teachers, from nurses, from doctors, from even trucks drivers. There was a lot of opposition in the society, and they, whenever they are unable to do something to actually solve some issues, they are inventing or reinventing this abstract monster of a gender ideology. So I think without this government, the discussion about the dangers of gender ideology is gonna be pretty invisible long term. Because this is, we see 70% support from the people to the women's strike movement. So we can see there is a large support for women's issues and women's rights in the society. So the popularity of this gender ideology and the popularity of those discriminatory and very often offensive sayings about words that were spoken by the government members and right-wing publicists and church representatives. There were always some kind of attempts to attack, but I don't think they were really understood. It was very vocal. It is always very popular, widely discussed, but that does not stay in. I don't believe this message is something people actually care about long term, because they use it. It's used as a political tool and is perceived as such. And people are less and less naive if it goes to those kind of political practices and political strategies, because they see there is nothing behind it. that this narrative that this rhetoric that something is endangering our kids and our families, they see that this is not gender ideology is endangering their families and their kids, but for now it's COVID and economic crisis, and this is something real they can feel and they can see solutions for, but they cannot see that those solutions are actually implemented by the government. So I think this reality of the pandemic and the crisis all around us sort of opened eyes for many, and showed that these distractions and those buzzwords are not the solution. They are only a sort of a placeholder topic of such. So I think the pandemic is sort of start to counter this post-truth world we are living, because I know it's not always the case when we observe for vaccination debate or something like that, but in case of gender ideology and LGBT ideology, I see that people are just tired of listening that gender ideology is to be blamed for when they have trouble to go to the doctor, because they know there's a real reason behind this problem and not gender is the problem. So yeah, I think so for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. I'd like to ask from Reka if this kind of antagonization of gender and claiming that there is something like a gender conspiracy, does it affect your work as a women advocacy group, or can you still work together with political decision makers on the government level, or you are just kind of stigmatized as being part of a gender lobby?
Thank you for the question. I can relate a lot to how Nina has described the situation in Poland. This streak is very much visible in Hungary as well. The problem with the government using gender in its different meanings has been with us for a longer time, and our organization has definitely been in the spotlight or has been attacked actually by the government for that. We have also experienced that they have stopped the accreditation of the gender studies MA program that existed for a short while, for a few years only, which was a total rejection of all areas of gender studies, and it has become just more difficult to research this area, which is very, very important. But I would say that gender equality in Hungary, as it is seen, is in the EU as a very basic policy of the EU to create or help the promotion of equality between women and men, has also never been accepted at a high enough level politically in Hungary. So even just to deal with discrimination of women or against women based on the fact that they were born as women. Gender mainstreaming, for example, has never become like a vocally and very much accepted policy approach. But the other meaning and the changing meaning of gender to incorporate gender identity has been very much attacked by the government for a long time. In the latest development is the new proposed legislation to include the protection of children and their the teaching of children according to their born sex, and so it's called created sex, where they also cite Hungary's Catholic identity and background, something that now the government can dubiously claim under certain circumstances at the EU level. But it is now used as a really real political tool, I think, towards the EU, because it is a reaction or a prevention of certain developments that they have seen in the West, that is perceived to be happening in the West. And this is the spread of gender identity, even among children, they say. And I have to say that we also think that it is important not to lose sight of women's special needs based on their biology, their social roles, and everything about being a woman. But this should happen in a how it's recognized in the law and in policy should happen in a democratic debate, and we think that this is quite lacking at the moment under a government that approaches these issues in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Rika Schafran. Andrea, I'd like to ask you if do you see the same developments in Slovenia like in Hungary or in Poland, that right-wing populist political forces are claiming that there is some kind of gender threat, and they just really like to use this this interpretation in order to, well, just to gain influence and popularity, while they don't really care about real-world problems, as Nina said it.
Well, also in Slovenia, at the moment, we have an illiberal government who has problems with such matters. For example, last year we have a lot of problem when we are changing our family law, and it was a lot of discussion about who can adopt, who cannot adopt, what is the normal family, so-called normal family, and this threat that these different genders will destroy the normal family is really what I say, it's a lack of knowledge. So if people would be informated better to get this information, what is the real matter on this, I'm sure that a lot of people would don't care and not opposite to these different types of gender. But yes, of course, we are going on the same way because our government, well, the Hungarian leader is the most highly accepted in our government. So it's such an ideal type of how to run the country, and I am afraid of that, and people in Slovenia are afraid of that. So we are doing everything not to go, and I'm apologize to my Hungarian colleagues, not to go on the same way that you are right now. I really apologize for that. And that is also the reason why we are striking every Friday from the beginning that this government become a leader of our Slovenia. So also in the future, we will fight against such lack of information, and we really need to change this this opinion that this is something wrong and that is a threat to the normal family. It is very similar like a few migrants that came in the country, and then people are afraid that they might change the culture of the nation. This is very similar to that.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Well, I think it's the best is to learn from other people's faults. So in this case, I think we can say the Hungarian participants that I think it's okay to learn from that what happened in Hungary. Our time is up, and I think it was a very interesting discussion for me. I have a lot of takeaways. I think it's very important to start such discussions, because this could be the basis of how progressive forces, feminists, can challenge the so-called this anti-gender movement of populist regimes. I think it's important, and it's also very important that I think we noted that in a lot of cases we think that women's rights are granted, that men and women are equal, but as a matter of fact, and we can see actually that during the lockdown, a lot of inequalities are reconstructed. So actually, it seems like it's a permanent fight for more rights and for the emancipation of women. I think I'm very happy that we could bring together civil society representatives, decision makers on the local and on the European level, professionals who are focusing, researching these issues. But I think if our listeners, those who are watching this discussion, I think it's also possible to act in our own environment. I think it's important to be aware if someone is, if domestic violence is happen in their environment during these times, because as we discussed, for many of the victims don't have the opportunity to reach out from these closed homes. So thank you very much again for Andrea Skrabec, Nina Gabris, Réka Sáfrány, Zinaida Zlatanova, Katalin Cseh for the participation, and thank you very much for Sebastjan Pikl for the organization of this online discussion. Good evening. Bye.